Grief can be heavy, but faith gives us hope. Welcome to a Catholic Journey podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Diaz. Join me as we explore how to lean on God in hard times, embrace the beauty of the Catholic faith, and walk this journey together. Welcome to a new episode of a Catholic Journey podcast. I am your host, Jessica, and today I have my really good friend, Alicia Corvin, on the show with me to have a really good conversation about grief and how that affects our everyday life. Because I think, for me at least, and Alicia, correct me if I'm wrong or if you have a different view on this, but I feel like grief is looked at as an event that occurs. And like once the funeral ends, once the condolences are done, once all of the obvious things take place, it kind of just, the dust settles, and then people around you almost expect you to just go back to day-to-day life as if nothing happened. That was such a stark contrast for me because I literally felt like I saw the world moving at normal pace, and I almost felt like I was on pause, like everyone's just going about their everyday life, and I'm not there yet. And yet, I have to keep moving at their pace. I have to keep putting my best face forward, smiling, saying hi to people, having conversations I didn't want to have because I didn't want to talk to anyone. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because I know we share that in common. We both lost our parents. But before we start, I would love for you to introduce yourself to our listeners. Who are you? Where are you from? And then share a little bit about your personal grief story.
Yes. My name's Alicia. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. And my personal grief story has been kind of a roller coaster ride the last 15 years of my life. I lost my mom in my late 20s. And then last year, I lost my dad. So there was a stretch. Between that stretch, I also lost my grandparents. I lost a cousin. I feel like the last 15 years of my life, I've been to more funerals than weddings. It's something that has shaped me to the core of my outlook on life and everything. And it took me a really long time to navigate how to feel through it, how to kind of move through it in a way that was kind of finding a rhythm of, understanding that it's not just stages, it's cycles, it's waves, and it's something that you do have to talk about. You do have to cry through. You do have to scream if you have to. I think society has taught us to internalize a lot of stuff and hold on a brave face because you want to set precedent, not just for yourself, but for your loved ones of, we can keep moving through this. We can keep finding meaning and purpose and stuff like that. But no one tells you that it sticks with you, I feel like the way I was taught about grief, it's just like, you lose someone and it's hard, but it gets easier. And then one day, you feel like you can move forward and everything's fine. And that wasn't the case, After my mom passed, my world shattered. And like you said, I felt suffocated by the grief and angry. I hated the fact that the world kept going. I hated the fact that I had to go back to work and I'd see people on the train. You know what I mean? Like, I had the hustle and the bustle of like everyday life, and I couldn't find meaning or purpose of like why I was still here, and why she had to leave so soon, why it was so sudden, you start rehashing everything that went wrong, everything that, like all the positives and negatives of
Yeah.
the relationship you had with that person,
Yeah.
but also what's next? Like, okay, now what?
Now what do I do?
I never
Yeah.
thought, and for me at the time, it was, like I started thinking, I was like, she's never going to see me get married. She's never going to see me have a kid, like all this stuff. And then the aftermath of it, of how while you're grieving, the people around you who also had a relationship with that person all grieve differently. And that was
Yes.
also,
Yes.
that's also extremely difficult. And it was really hard to help not just myself go through that, but not, I don't want to say step on eggshells, but to be present and hold space for my dad, for my brother, for my sister, because we were all grieving in different ways. And my family, especially my mom's side, like we're really close. When she passed, it was something that shook us to the core.
Yeah.
And it was navigating years of trying to find ways to be there for each other and try to make space when we saw each other struggling through something.
Not to cut you off, but I think you made a really good point about feeling like you had to walk on eggshells for certain people. And I think for me, the walking on eggshells came from trying not to make other people uncomfortable with my grief.
Yes.
I would have my breakdowns at home, and obviously like my kids and my husband knew what were going on. I think in my situation's a little bit different. And I spoke about this in my first episode. I kind of lost my parents back to back 3 years ago. So it was almost a situation where I didn't really get a chance to fully grieve my mom, because literally as she passed away, my dad was dying, and it went from putting out one fire to now dealing with another situation. So the smoke didn't settle in between.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until after my father passed away that finally it felt like, okay, I can breathe and now figure out what. And I found myself thrown right back into school drop-offs and, talking to the teachers. And
yes,
it's funny because I look back and I'm like, I think I held it okay. I think like no one else knew. And I go back and see pictures of myself at that time, and I looked so horrible because I was wearing the grief on my face, and I thought I was doing such a good job at being the stoic parent, holding it together. And people I look back and I'm like, yeah, I'm sure people could tell at the pickup line that I was going through something. But I constantly felt like I had to, I was worrying about the people around me so that I wasn't making them uncomfortable. I struggled with that a lot because, it could literally be, I could literally go to drop off and be okay and be like, okay, I'm okay. I'm not like in any kind of emotional state. And then I speak to like one person and they say one word and instantly that lump in my throat,
Oh yeah.
That would develop. And it was so like, oh, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. And you talked about the awkwardness or the feeling that you had going back to work. I didn't have that because at that time I was a stay-at-home mom. So I kind of just got thrown back into my daily routine, which to some point I feel like maybe it was good, maybe it wasn't, because I didn't have the distractions, that like a busy work day would give you. I had my chores to do, but I had plenty of time to be in my thoughts because there wasn't a task that I had to complete by a certain time, like you go to work, you have your to-do list that kind of keeps your mind busy. You have meetings to go to, phone calls to make with people, projects to handle. What did that look like for you when you had to go back into that after your mom passed away?
I was a curated hot mess. I went back. I didn't have back at that time, I didn't have like enough PTO days for, I forgot there was like a limit so it was like 3 PTO days. I was like, oh, cool. Like, let me just, like my life just shattered, but yeah, I'll be back on Monday. So I
Yeah,
remember going back to
that's
work on
another thing.
Monday, and I thought I was having an asthma attack on the train. I was like, I can't
Mm.
breathe. And I remember going into the office building and just going to the bathroom and going into the stall and like trying to breathe. And I was like taking like I felt like I was gasping for air. I took my inhaler and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, what the is wrong with me? And then I just started like crying, but like silently because I didn't want anybody to be like, walk in and I'm like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I'm trying to like get it together, and it took me like probably 15 minutes to just like try to get it in, but my face was all red, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like walking into a cubicle, so like you know what I mean? There was no privacy and
Yeah.
anything. And my coworkers, like everybody knew, so they were just like, a few coworkers came by and they were like, I'm so sorry. And I was just like, just nodding, like, and one coworker in particular had come over, and I think she had like recently lost her parents too, and
Mm-hmm.
I down again,
Yeah.
and I couldn't. I was so, you get so choked up you can't even like find the words,
Yeah.
and we had to go back to the bathroom so I could
Yeah.
um just kind of find my composure, but it kind of look like that for at least a month. I had to either dip out after a meeting and like walk around the block to kind
Mm-hmm.
of, because they would come randomly. Like I'd be in a status meeting and then all of a sudden something would hit me, like a memory or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And I didn't know. I was so dysregulated. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
to,
And just to let people know,
yeah.
that wasn't an asthma attack. That was a panic attack, an
No,
anxiety attack,
I
or
started having, I went to the doctor and they told me, they were like, you're having panic attacks. These are anxiety attacks after grief. And
yeah.
I couldn't, I didn't realize I was having a trauma response too to anybody who called me at like between 7 and 9 a.m.
Mm,
I'd freeze when the phone would ring.
right.
And it was because, well, that's when I found out. So there
Mm-hmm.
were these little triggers that I couldn't unlearn. You know what I mean? It was just
Yeah.
this physical trigger that I had that until this day, I cannot get, like when I get morning calls, I have to like take a breath. And me and my
Mm-hmm.
brother too, when we call each other in the morning, we're like, we literally have to be like, hey, nothing's wrong. I just wanted
Yeah.
to say but it's because it happened with not just like our mom, it happened with our dad, it happened with our grandparents. So
Yeah.
morning calls for us are like stress
The
stress
worst.
triggers. So
Yeah.
we have to like open it up with a joke of
Everything's
like,
fine.
I'm
Yeah.
okay. Everything's fine. But
Yeah.
it was, yeah, it was really, it was difficult in the sense of not knowing how your body keeps the score, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Not knowing how your body's going to react to trauma responses that you didn't even realize. You know what I mean? Like you went
Yeah.
through it when it happens, but you didn't realize how intense it would be and how it would stretch out in your day to day.
Just for
Yeah.
context, I should have mentioned this in the beginning, but I know Alicia because in my past life, when I used to work as a video editor for cable TV, that's how we met. I used to work the night shift, which was honestly the best gig ever in the world. I used to work the night shift at a TV station, and the schedule was from 6 to 2 in the morning, but we rarely ever stayed till 2 in the morning. And I was a promo video editor, and Alicia, I don't remember exactly where in my time frame of working there. I was a freelancer. And then you started working there at night also. But from my perspective, on the outside looking in, something I noticed within you or with you after your mom passed away is sort of this fire developed inside of you that I saw, especially in your career. where it sort of fired you up in such a way that when we worked together in the cable, and I'm not going to name the name of the TV station just for just in case. But you went from a production assistant at the same job that we worked at. And I don't remember
it was an assistant video editor.
Okay, assistant video editor. And then I don't remember what you did at your day job, but I
was
almost
a production manager, and then
and then I feel like within that year, you just shot up.
It was funny. It was what broke me also gave me clarity and conviction in a lot of what I did, and I think a lot of ways you get complacent when you have a full-time job, so you don't want to speak up about certain things and stuff like that. And then for me, it was almost transmuting grief into kind of like a sacred rage, but purposeful. So when I felt like I was being treated unfairly or someone else was, I would fight for it. Or if I felt like something needed to change, I would make a proposal for it. I don't know. It was like I got more rebellious in a lot of ways. Of even like I was trying to leave the department I was in because I was editing at night. And then I was working during the day, full time during the day. And I started making proposals for positions for myself because of different departments I worked in. I was like, this is what I can do. This is what I'm proposing. And it took about 6 months or so, and they started listening to me, and they started seeing how I was like viewing, how to do certain campaign processes and, production techniques and stuff like that. They saw that I was still editing because I had to disclose that. I feel like every year or so I would be like, I have an idea for this. I have an idea for that. And I ended up going into the sports group. And from there, I still remember being told, don't do it. You're going to be one of the few women there. It's like the mafia, blah, 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 and all this nonsense. And I was like, I'm going to do it. I don't care. Because I saw a skill set and opportunity to work on stuff that other people didn't. And I was like, that's going to make me more of a well-rounded producer and stuff. And then, you're like, after a few years, I ended up being the VP. So
amazing.
It was a battle, but I think, I feel like I had no more fucks to give in terms of how people were, just petty or just saw everything in such a trivial surface way. And for me, I was like, if I'm going to make change, I'm going to make it in a way that is going to not just impact my day-to-day, but I want it to impact the day-to-day for the people that work with me, that work around me. And it was never so much, climbing the ladder and stuff like that. It was kind of making good trouble, And when I saw the opportunity, I would do it. And if somebody wanted to debate me on it or battle, with me, so, quote unquote, politically and stuff like that, I knew how to kind of be diplomatic enough in a way to show the positive and the negative side about it, but also seek compromise of like, this is what you can get out of it, and this is what I can get out of it, and this is what the collective can get out of it. So it was, for me, that was almost therapeutic in the sense of like, I kept feeling like I was fighting for myself and then fighting for other coworkers who were dealing with similar things. And I, that was what, 15 years there. And then,
yes,
I won't say where else I worked, but after leaving and whatnot, it was the same thing, like going to other jobs and stuff. And it was this constant, I don't want to say fight. It was just, when I work, I'm passionate, but I'm also very transparent. And some people don't like that. So, I joke with, colleagues and stuff of like, they're like, oh, you're not everyone's cup of tea because of like old school mindsets. I was like, I'm not tea, I'm ayahuasca. Like I wanted It was like, I'm trying to like wake these people up, but it's like, I'm trying to show people that it's not like, we're storytellers. We're not saving lives, but
Yeah.
you want to do things in a way that are impactful, but you also want to create an environment with people around you that do feel, that it feels collaborative, that you feel seen, you feel appreciative, and for me, I think something that grew from that was I really see people for who they are. I see the dark, I see the light, and I think it's from all the grief and from everything.
Yeah.
Like, it's surprising how your suffering can transmute into something else. My biggest victories in my life aren't my awards or my titles. It's how I made the people I worked with feel, especially the people on my team. And I think no matter how much I hurt, you know what I mean, in my loss, I think it's also showed me, because I know the cost. I like love so much harder, and it's like I fight so much harder. I want to understand people much more, and I think it agitates me when I can't connect with a person in terms of like if they just want to keep it surface, and that's fine. It's not some people just don't want other people to be in and stuff, but if I can't connect with a person on a certain level, I don't know how to communicate with them. You know what I mean? Like efficiently I think because I'm neurospicy. So I don't know. It's weird because I feel like, some people will completely, break down their walls and be completely honest and trauma dump, so to speak, and whatever. But I create that space for them, and it's, I'd rather see radical honesty and transparency because I think that's where people connect so much deeper than, pivoting diplomatically, which is fine. I get it. Especially with business and stuff like that. But I also think that's what's wrong with business, is that we have been so muted and so watered down and so curated and filtered that we forget that a little bit of transparency in a, carefully curated way is healing. I don't know how else to explain it.
I remember a friend of mine that I'm really close with, and she had lost her mom years before I even met her. And so when my mom passed away, she's like, welcome to like the worst club in the world, because there's like this immediate unspoken understanding when you know that you're with someone or friends with someone or talking to someone that has also experienced a deep grief. Because without even talking about it, sometimes like you get it. You feel the weight that they're carrying on their chest because you carry the same weight on yours. Yes. And so I think that's why people who haven't experienced it, because I'm sure I've said one of the catalog of things that were so meaningless and inappropriate at the time. Things like, oh, they're in a better place, or everything happens for a reason, and all these other things. And I remember when my parents said it, and I had people saying that to me, I didn't get offense to it because I finally understood both sides of it.
And it's hard to respond with the right condolences after someone loses someone. And I think we all try to say the right thing or the best thing that we can, but
there really isn't anything you can say.
There really isn't.
There's
I
nothing.
think the best thing you could do is offer them to be like, if you need to ever just sit with me and cry, just let me know. You know what I mean? It goes back to, people talk about empathy and having empathy for certain things and stuff like that. But like, my experience with empathy is if you haven't had something stripped from you or someone stripped from you, you know what I mean? If you haven't lost.
Yeah, there's a disconnect.
Deeply, if you haven't lost deeply, if you do not know the cost of that type of like grief, if you don't know the cost of grief, then you don't really understand empathy.
Right.
That's
And it's
my opinion on it, you know?
Right. And I think I want to make it clear that it's not that person's fault. They just haven't experienced it. So they
exactly,
can't possibly understand it, you know?
Exactly. And that's what it is. I just think you can have different levels of understanding of what you think empathy is, and you can be sympathetic, or you try to be there for someone, but I think it all comes down to experiencing that type of, it's more than putting yourself in that person's shoes. It's like you have to, there's certain things you have to experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can try to be there for someone and stuff like that, but it's not until you lose someone that you start seeing the world differently. And when other people close to you start losing loved ones, you know, themselves,
Get it. Yeah.
You totally get it. And you try to be more present to making space for them in different ways than you would have in the past, you know?
Right.
And, you know, some people don't, it's relationships change too. I think that's another thing that people don't want to admit, of like how much our relationships, whether the intimacy with like, you know, whether it's romantic, personal, you know, family, friend, they all change in different ways. And it's not a bad thing. It just transforms into something else. And then sometimes it can go the other way. You could start seeing of like, it starts breaking apart, you know?
Yeah. And I think the most important thing that people don't realize is that we change. We are no longer the same person that we were before we lost that person in our life.
Yes.
I don't even know where that girl is. I haven't found her in 3 years. I don't know. She's gone. But that was a huge thing. A huge moment of realization for me is that I'm not the same person I was before my mom passed and before my dad passed away. I'm completely different. And I feel like grief plays a huge part in not only changing who we are before, but taking us on a completely different path than we ever even visioned for ourselves. You know, in my case, after my parents died, I immersed myself in my faith because I didn't have anywhere else to go. There was no other place for me to focus my energy outside, you know, obviously outside of my kids. I found myself looking at my kids differently because I had a bigger understanding of how finite our lives are. You know, we do not live forever. That was a huge thing for me, is that I was like, there's an end. Like we do not stay in this world forever. You know, we can't keep putting things off until tomorrow, because tomorrow could be over. You know, we don't know when, right? That's one thing that became very clear for me. I don't know when, but I am certain that it will be. So with that like true understanding of it, because, you know, I feel like we all know, one day we're going to die, but it's not until it's right in front of you that, for me, it was like, this world is not forever. This life, this body, this that I have is not forever. I will leave this earth one day. And so for me, that channeled itself into the journey that I'm on. I mean, you would have asked me 3 years ago, Jess, are you working on a grief journal and doing a podcast? Like, are you kidding me? I'd be like, I'm a post-production girl. I'm behind the scenes. I don't do this. But something else that I learned in this journey of grief is that people don't talk about it enough.
They don't.
So
I think
there's huge stigma. Yeah.
Yeah. I love the fact. So, and it goes back to everyone grieves differently. Everybody has to channel their healing in different ways. And there's no wrong or right way. There's just,
1,000%.
You start learning things about, you know, yourself and like what it takes for you to
survive,
find that path. To survive. And I love the fact that you wanted to channel your grief in different ways. You know what I mean? Like doing the grief journal, doing a podcast, because you have no idea who this will help, even if it's one person, you know, like it's people need to understand that there's no perfect step-by-step process in this. It's a cycle. It's a roller coaster. You will completely, like for me, it's true. It's like I completely shattered, and then I tried to find my voice in a lot of different ways. But then when my dad got sick, I felt like my light was dimming again, you know? And it was a different situation in the sense of I have a daughter. So it wasn't about that loss, you know, we were trying to prepare ourselves as he was, you know, his health was deteriorating. But I had to think of, how do I prepare my child?
Yeah.
She's so close to him, you know, and it's like they had this, you know, relationship and everything, and they were close. And how do you tell an 8-year-old, like, you know, like how do you teach your children about death? How do you teach your children about, you know, how to move on from death, and, you know, how they navigate, you know, it's like, there's all these things that there's no perfect way of doing it. You are winging it. And we wear this mask of resilience of like, you know, like we got to do this and we got to do that and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, there's two main paths, I think, you know, in terms of healing. Or I don't even want to say, I'm not healing, grieving. It's the path of trying your best to feel through all of it and finding, you know, all those winds and turns of what will help you heal, what will help the people around you, you know, heal. And in terms of, you know, how you guys are navigating it, talking about it and stuff like that. The other path is the path that I think we all deal with, and it's the path I most fear, of numbing and detachment. And I think that is something that is the biggest battle for everyone who loses someone, is when you do cycle through, you know, every level of grief, is trying really hard not to lose yourself in it. Yeah. And to try not to show that you're losing yourself, you know, around your loved ones. And it's difficult. And I think there's no surprise that people who are dealing with grief, you know, that do like end up, you know, turning to methods of numbing themselves or detaching and stuff like that. But I think if there were more spaces where we spoke about it, that it's okay to be the messy and the broken, you know what I mean? And find your way out of it. I think if there were more spaces like that, people would have that, like, you know, like rope of hope to go towards, because I think it's an issue. I think it's an issue with everyone, you know? At all ages, at all stages of life, because there's no rule book for this. And I think everybody...
Well, there's the I don't know if there's an exact book, but I know there's like the stages of grief. I've seen things like that. And I kind of giggle when I read that, because I'm like, I know, it's literally just a balled up mess. And it kind of just... That's
all it is.
Weaves itself into every aspect of your life and every emotion of your life. Because there have been plenty of times where I've experienced, you know, after my parents passed, that I've cackled so loud, like something was so funny to me. And then in that same moment, that lump in my throat would develop, because I'd be like, damn, they're not here to share it with, you know? And that's been a process. And that still happens to me now, you know? And in my instance, in my experience, I lost both my parents. I had my 3 boys, and it's been a very different experience with each of them, because my oldest, he obviously spent the most time with my parents. So he had a very special relationship with them. And so that was very hard to sort of navigate, because we were, you know, we're both grieving and experiencing loss. And so I didn't know, I still don't know what I'm doing. And, you know, we figure it out every day, and I try to check in with him, you know, on how he's feeling. And and then I had my two little ones where my youngest wasn't really talking that much to really express any kind of emotion.
Yeah.
And then I had my middle one who was so, I want to say he kind of brought the comedy relief for me that I needed during those moments because he was asking genuine questions. I will never forget. So we did the mass this was after my mom passed away. And we did the mass after her wake, and we were at the church. And that was the first time he had seen a coffin, because they brought her into the church. And, it's one of these things where I look back now and I realize that I could have prepared him for that a little bit differently, but I was also like in this tornado of like emotions. And then on top of the emotions, I had all these things I had to do. I had to prepare a wake. I had to do this. I had to notify family. I had to contact the church. There's this whole to-do list that comes with grief. And I'd love to like do a whole separate conversation with you on that, because I don't think people realize the laundry list of things that come with that, that you have to handle while you're grieving someone. But so I'll never forget, we're in the church and we're starting the mass. And so it's sort of like a procession where you take the coffin down the aisle. And so my middle son sees my mom's coffin and he's like, "Mom, what's in the box?" And I'm like, "Oh, baby, that's abuela. She's in the box." And abuela's Spanish for grandmother. And then my kids called my parents abuela and abuelo. And he was like, "Abuela's in the box?" I'm like, "Yes, baby, abuela's in the box." "Well, is her head in there too?" And I was like, and I don't know.
It's a valid question.
I don't know why. I won't go into the details of how my parents passed away, but I will say my mom was not decapitated. So why he would ask if her head was also in the box? It was a fairly big box, and my mom was very petite. My mom was 4'11", so she definitely all of her fit in there. And so I remember he said that, and I just cackled because I'm like, "Yes, baby. Yes, baby, all of her in the box. And her feet too, yes, baby, from head to toe. She is all one person in there." And he was like, "Oh, okay." And he didn't ask after that. He was just concerned that she was all in there. And I was like, "Yeah, baby, she's in there. She's good. She's comfortable. She's sleeping in there, whatever." And I remember I had to have, the conversation of like, "Well, is she in there?" And I said, "Well, baby, her body's in there, but her soul is in heaven now. Her soul is with Jesus." And that kind of, I think for me also propelled my journey, because I'm like, I don't even know like if I'm saying this correctly, if I'm explaining this correctly, like for him to understand. And then I found myself also having to have a very different conversation with my oldest, because he understood what death meant, you know? And so it was interesting for me, because I found myself in these two very different conversations. One where I feel like it was kind of healing for me because it was comedy relief with my little one. Just his questions were so innocent and so cute that it would make me laugh. And I hold on to that because that, like, I needed that. And then trying to carry that lightness with my oldest one so that he can be okay, even though it was so hard for me to console him in that moment in the very beginning, because I needed to be consoled. I was a mess. And so it was hard for me to be like, "It's okay, son," while I literally, like you said, could barely breathe sometimes. And they would see me that way. Yeah. And I always made it a point to be very honest with my kids and, not hide that I was grieving, but explain to them that if I'm short with you in this moment, if I can't, have this conversation with you right now, it's not because I don't want to or because I don't love you, but I literally just can't right now, because I'm also grieving. And so let's set a time to do it where we can have the conversation and come back to it. Because sometimes I literally couldn't even get the words out either.
Yeah, it's hard. It's messy, and it's
so messy.
you're trying to feel through it. And especially when you have kids too, you don't know how to explain this stuff. Like the same, like for me, I felt like I was raised Catholic, but I feel like I have faith in something bigger, right? And when I pray to my parents. That is how I'm, and when my dad passed and I had to tell my daughter, it was, she had all these questions. She's like, where is he? Like, is there a heaven? Is it, cause she's heard of and I'm trying to explain to her, and she's like, well, what is it? I was like, baby, we're on a floating rock right now, spinning. It's like, I was like, I really don't know, but I
love that.
I'd like to believe that, Abuela and Papa are, they're somewhere better, and they're together now. And you might see them in your dreams sometimes, you might feel them. And, when you're missing them, pray to them, talk to them in your head. And I remember the day after my dad passed, I was walking my dog and my daughter came with me, and she looked at me. She's like, I prayed to Papa that we'd find a 4-leaf clover today. And I kid you not, Jess, we found a 4-leaf clover on our way back. So it's the little things, the little signs and stuff. Yeah. So it's stuff like that gives me faith. It's those little signs from the divine that I'm like, there's something more here.
It's healing.
I know I know they're around in some way. I still feel them around sometimes, especially in my darkest moments. And it's something that it helps me continue on. It helps me find meaning. And I hope, my daughter too, she seems more hopeful too, with knowing that there's something beyond this. Like I can't tell her like, this is it. 'Cause I don't believe that, I believe there is something more. I believe that we are all interconnected somehow and everything. And to see how she loves too also gives me hope, So it's just, and the same thing like with you and your kids, like when you have that conversation and that connection, and when you do ask questions and stuff like that, like it's good. There's nothing wrong with that,
Well, I'll share one thing. Me too. One thing that stuck with me. So my middle son did his first communion. I want to say he's in 3rd grade now. So I want to say last year he did his first communion. And they had, so before you do your actual first communion, you do what they call, I'm probably saying it wrong because I forget, but it's like you do your penance. So it's the first time your kids go to confession. And that's like the first thing before their actual first communion. So, they had the mass for that. Well, it's not really a mass. You kind of just go to church, and then all the children that are going to do their first communion, they each take a turn. And in this one, they invited the parents to participate as well.
Okay.
Kind of to show your kids that it's not like a horrible thing that you're doing. And so that was my actual first time confessing in like forever, because I really just felt called to have that moment with my son. So he went first and he did his confession with the priest, and then I went after him. And that, I don't think that priest knew what was coming for him, because I was just so emotional. It just was so overwhelming. But one thing that he said that really stuck with me was, and you say you pray to your parents, but you can ask your parents to pray for you and to give you whatever you need here. And that was so powerful for me, because I'm like, I didn't know I could do that. And he's like, 1,000% you can. He goes, ask your parents to pray for you for the strength that you need, or whatever it is that you need, that you're struggling with in your grief journey. And so that's been so huge for me. and something that I shared with my kids. We do our prayers at night, and I always make sure to include my parents in it. But that was so huge for me, and it has stuck with me. And I make sure to do that like every time that I do say my prayers. I always ask for my parents to pray for me and for my children. So just want to offer that up to you or anyone else who might be listening. I'm trying so hard not to get emotional. Let me take a sip of my drink.
I feel like it's all right. I feel like I've already cried 3 or 4 times.
That's okay. You're good. Once I start, I can't stop. I'm in these. So I've mentioned before, I'm doing my confirmation. So I go to a religion class every Sunday. And it's me and another candidate, but it's not just like us two and a teacher. It's our teacher, and it's literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 other people. And
okay.
So we're all in this group, and I am such a crybaby. And it's terrible because once I start, like I go like, and I can't get the words out.
But you have to get it out. Yeah.
No, I know I do.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes it's at the worst moment. I remember the first class, we did introductions.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what it was, just being there. I was excited because I'm like, I've never done my confirmation before. This is like a huge thing for me. And so they had the other candidate introduce himself, and I already felt it in I was like, oh no, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. And the minute they were like, okay, Jessica, now tell us about you. And I was just like, bleh, word grief vomit all over the table. And I was like, well, I lost my parents and this and that. And so what my teacher taught me, I don't know how true this is. I could just be very, very big crybaby. But he said that I have the gift of tears, and I'm very like emotional. And so I've been trying to embrace it more. But it really does come at the worst times.
The worst time.
The worst times.
So in pretending I had together, I had an interview like a month after my dad passed last year. Started crying during it. Why? I don't even know. I think I was because when I talk about...
Were they asking you?
I was talking about something, it had to do with social impact, and I got choked up, and they were like, are you all right? I'm like,
I'm fine.
I'm fine. So, but I told them, I was like, I'm sorry, I recently lost a parent, and when I talk about this stuff, I get worked up. But
isn't that crazy that we apologize?
Yeah. I mean, it's because you try to be,
because
for the
we
sake
don't
of a
want
better word, palatable to the person you're talking to.
Right. We don't want to make them uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. And they don't know that you've just been, traumatized, but and you're trying to you're like, I'm fine.
Put the mask on. Yeah. I find on those heavy days, on the really heavy emotional days, and sometimes they are just so random. It could be like a random Wednesday, and I'm like, why am I so heavy today? And I have so many things that I need to do, doctor's appointments with the kids, or this or that, or sports or whatever. It's just go, go, go.
Yeah.
And sometimes sometimes I can't even pinpoint that it's the grief.
It could be a combination of grief, stress, And
I know, once the end of the day comes and I get in my bed, I'm like, oh my God, that was so heavy. Can someone just please pick this up for me? It's just so heavy.
Yeah. For me, the holidays are holidays for me are hard. And I've tried for a really long time. Like after I had my daughter, it got a little bit easier. But last year, not having both parents for the holidays was it is. It's hard, and you never know you can never really prepare yourself for how you're going to react on certain days, you know? And, some days you'll be totally fine and you'll find a rhythm and everything. And then others, sometimes you need to just break down, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, even having conversations with my brother, because, my brother's ex-military, you know, I don't want to say machismo, but, he tries to like...
They're tough, yeah.
Put on a brave face, yeah. But even him, I feel like he's softened over the last few years, allowing himself to feel through it. And we've become even closer because of that, because we talk about it and we joke about it too,
Yeah.
That's the thing. When you can find humor in the sadness, that is the most healing.
I have definitely, oddly enough, found myself embracing the dark humor. And a big thing that helped me was I started finding like grief accounts on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, none of them come to mind, but if I can remember them and I'll find them, I'll add them to the show notes for anyone else that wants to follow them. But I found grief accounts that are just all dark humor, and they were just, you know what it is, because they're so relatable. And I feel like, again, someone who hasn't experienced grief are like, what is wrong with her? Like, is she okay? Like, and it's like, you won't get it until you've been there, because it's so relatable. And it's things that you think in your head, but you're like, oh, I can't say it because it's inappropriate. I still, with my sisters, will say like really inappropriate jokes, dark humor, because we have that understanding.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things that if you're not in it, if you haven't lived it or experienced it, like you're not going to get it. It's kind of like whatever works, right? Like for me, a huge thing that helped me heal, obviously, like I said, was my faith, but also, so before my parents died, I was really into calligraphy, and I used that. Like that was like my side hustle, right? Like I had like a little business going, and I would do a couple of projects here and there. And it was after my parents passed away that I said, I really want, like, I feel like I need to do something different or something that incorporated them creatively in my life. And so that's why I ended up changing my business name to Mimi Manuel, because I wanted to honor my parents. And that change of name led me on this whole other journey of like, well, I want to create something to help people, because this sucks, for lack of a better word to express it. Grief sucks. And, I want to take something that's helped me and has been so pivotal for my life in the last 3 years, life-changing even. And so how can I help people with that? And so that one thing of like my parents dying and then changing my business name to honor them then led me on this whole other journey of like, well, I want to create something to help people. And so now I'm working on that grief journal, which then oddly enough led me here, wanting to have these conversations, because you don't hear enough about them.
It's true.
So I wanted to ask you, I know for me, when after my parents passed away and when I started working, something that I was very adamant about was setting the boundary that if I was gonna continue to work or start working again, in my case, because I was a stay-at-home mom for so many years, and I remember I said this to my husband, if I'm going to do this and I'm going to work with clients that I feel good about, right? That have shared values or kind of are on not on a mission, but have a purposeful message that they're sending out to their audience. And so I've been lucky in that I've been able to sort of curate this clientele where the people that I work with, they have positive messages. And that was a very, very strong boundary that I set for myself when I got back into the workforce, was that I'm going to do this, but it's going to be on my terms. And also because after grief, I just didn't have the tolerance level for games or nonsense or, lies. So what did that look like for you in your journey in the professional world or even in your creative life? How did that translate for you? Did you feel like you had to set boundaries, or did you feel like you wanted to take things a certain way that made sense for you?
Yeah. After my mom passed, it took a long time. I think I was younger and I used work as a distraction. I felt like whatever impact I could make internally was like how I would fulfill myself. The work I was doing, I wasn't exactly passionate about, but I liked the skill sets I was building. But it wasn't until like the pandemic and having that kind of stop me in my tracks in terms of like allowing myself to grieve the way I really needed to and sit with it. And then the next pivot was when my dad became terminally ill. I made a conscious decision of leaving corporate because I wanted to stop pretending. I was working with so many different companies that were so performative in their storytelling and the narratives that they were creating internally and externally when selling a campaign, a service, a product, or otherwise. And I became disgusted by it. And when we got the news and they said like we don't know how much time he has left. I made a conscious effort. I was like, if I'm going to do something, I need to follow what's always been in my gut. And I've always loved social impact work. I've always loved storytelling in a way that triggered the viewer to want to do something, to want to pivot in a way that was positive, positive in the sense of wanting to do better, not just for themselves, but maybe for another person, and or question the contradictory nature of how we are consuming information and what we are seeing when it comes to storytelling through a patriarchal lens that is media, right? And when I made that pivot, it was hard because I was like, how do I keep the lights on? Because, it was it was like taking care of a parent that was deteriorating. I had a child, like me and my husband were both trying to find balance with who was going to be at home one day, who was going to go into the office and stuff like that. And it took a while because, you find more people that you think will align with you, but then you realize that they're either in it for themselves or they don't really see your value or they exploit your value in some way. But I started to finally meet more people. It was on the nonprofit side too, or just random projects who wanted to create things, whether they thought it was big or small, but in a very meaningful and purposeful way. And that started to give me just more peace. Like it became more fluid. And I would love to continue that. I love social impact work. I also love creative storytelling. It's just, it's got to be in a way that whatever story I am telling or whatever project I am working on, there's meaning behind it. Yeah. And in that meaning, like we're conveying it with conviction. It's not like being wishy-washy. You know what I mean? Like, I get, there's certain parameters you have to fulfill with certain things, but it's been a rough road in that sense because just with the industry, with media and tech in general, it's been a mess, but I stuck through it. And while all of that was happening, I renamed my LLC based on kind of going into a new phase of my life and seeing all these like pieces of brilliance that were scattered on so many different platforms, and how I started to become more of a Swiss Army knife of helping people, you know?
I like that analogy.
Yeah. I had all these skill sets and I didn't know how to quite, channel it. And I started getting into a flow when I started working on projects where I knew where to leverage certain skills with a certain client versus with another client and stuff like that. And it became easier in that sense. Finding that type of work now with the economy and stuff like that is a little bit more difficult, but I still I don't know. I'm still hopeful and I'm still determined about it. And ideally, if I could eventually create a platform that, educates and inspires, that would be great. But, the small steps in between and meeting different people and stuff like that, like that's what's serving me more now than it's ever before. And I think I'm so focused on being purposeful with every step I take. Even in conversations, if I have to go to a networking event, I want to have a purposeful conversation with strangers. I want to leave with something, and I want them to leave with something. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, I got hired. You know what I mean? Like, or like. I want to connect in a way where if I die tomorrow, it was worth it. And I think maybe that's a morbid way of thinking, but it's true. It's like when you lose people that you care about and stuff, you feel your mortality so much more. And you wish other people would not take advantage of, the time that they have left.
Or take it for granted.
Yeah. And it's hard because, everybody's going through their own stuff and everything. But I think for me, it's been this like blessing and curse of like everything I want to do, I want to do with purpose. And like anybody I meet, I want to connect. And it doesn't have to be like, I need to know all your, deepest, darkest secrets or anything like that.
Give me your diary.
Yeah, right? Although sometimes that happens. No, I'm just kidding. It's just, connecting in a way where we leave each other with something,
Yeah.
And that's positive. That's like, that conversation was good. I'm glad I had it. Even if I never speak to the person again, And I think that's something I never expected of myself because I had kind of oscillated back and forth between losing myself. Like sometimes I'm like really like, I could do this. I want to do this. I'm really passionate, blah, blah, blah. And then other times I don't know. I want to detach. I want to numb. I feel like humanity is lost. And every day, I'm not going to sit here and be like, it's all good. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like every day I go back and forth. And it's in those micro moments of like having like this conversation right now, dropping my daughter off to school and she says something so freaking adorable. Like, it's just, me and my husband joking while we're watching a TV show. Like, it's like those little moments where I pause and I'm like, remember this. And it like helps me kind of transmute whatever funkiness feeling, and channel it into something better. And I think that's something that I hope people get from this conversation is that, we're all not perfect. We're all contradictions. We all struggle
we're all broken. We are all broken. It's just that our cracks are in different places for each person. And
exactly.
And something that, one of the things that I wanted to kind of highlight is that, grief is heavy.
Yes.
Grief is so heavy and it's so exhausting. And it's not just mentally exhausting. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I find that sometimes it's physically exhausting.
Yeah.
Just to constantly
absolutely.
have that, for me, especially on the bad days, I'm constantly having this like inner dialogue, but also like this inner battle where I'm like, again, like, don't cry, don't break down. Like, we have to do this, we have to do that. Like, keep it together, keep a straight face. Don't forget to smile, be polite.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take your grief out on the next person, like at Starbucks or wherever you are.
Yeah.
And your mind is, totally not with them and what's happening, but more so what you're replaying in your mind. And you constantly have to remind yourself that, okay, this has to stay back here and you can't, take that out on the next person that calls or,
Yes.
the next person that speaks to you sideways. So it's this constant like dance that you're doing to kind of just keep yourself balanced throughout the day. And sometimes I win and sometimes I lose and I just don't want to talk to anyone. And I think for me as well, the biggest thing that's kept me grounded and kept me from going, to that super dark place is, my kids, because I'm like, I have to be present for them. And I have to,
absolutely.
I can't be the model that they're looking at that shows that like once something really difficult happens, you just bury yourself under the covers and don't ever come out. I want whoever's listening to this to understand is, number one, we all carry our grief differently. And we all express it differently. Some people are like, okay, I'm going to keep going and, maybe not miss a step, right? They don't miss a beat and they just keep going. But that doesn't mean that they're not carrying it on the inside. We're all having that same struggle on the inside. We're all carrying that 50-ton brick on our chest every single day. Some days it feels lighter. Some days we can barely move because it's so heavy, but we know we have to.
Yeah.
And so it looks different for every single person. And I don't know, maybe if you know someone who has experienced grief or is grieving, just know that they're carrying this weight. And I wouldn't say don't be so hard on them, but maybe have just a little bit more of understanding if they're not as sociable as they used to be, or if they're hyper sociable, understand that that's their coping mechanism. And something that I definitely want to offer in this episode is when I do the show notes for this episode, I'm definitely, I'm going to provide some resources for anyone who needs to talk to someone or is going through grief, some outlets that they can access online, because this is definitely not something that you go through by yourself. I know it's something I definitely couldn't be going through by myself. I'm lucky enough and blessed enough to have friends like you that unfortunately you share this journey that I'm on. And, and we have this thing in common that we both wish we didn't, but we do. But we can have these conversations. And I have other friends that I can talk to, in terms of my faith journey and how that intertwines with my grief. And also our creative journey, our relationship journey. Like, it's just all, I don't want to say it's muddied with grief, because I don't think grief is muddy. I think grief, while it's such a complicated feeling, it doesn't muddy everything. It's just laced into everything.
It's there was like an analogy. It has to do with, I had a conversation with my cousin, this was years ago, and we were talking about like soulmates and stuff like that, the concept of soulmates and everything like that, and spirituality and everything like that. And my answer to it, and it's never really changed, my answer to it was, I don't think we have just one soulmate. I think the people we meet in our lives, we're supposed to meet for a reason. The ones that we're close to, the ones that we can't stand and stuff like that. And the way, because I think it teaches you something. It shows a part of you. It's a reflection of a piece of you that you're struggling with, or you know what I mean? And the way I like with grief, if someone asked me like if there was a procedure where I could forget all the pain, like would I do it? I wouldn't. Because it's like shattered pieces of my reflection. So it's like looking up to a shattered mirror, but it's all glued back together, and it's seeing every single piece of how I loved, how I loved, hated, what do you mean? Like raged, expressed it, all these different people that have crossed my path and stuff like that. And I don't want to say that it wasn't, I'm glad it happened, no matter how painful, because I have so much more of an appreciation of life sometimes, not all the time, but, and I feel like I give more grace to even people that hurt me, in the sense that one day maybe they'll learn from it, or if, I like, you have to create boundaries. So if somebody hurts you, create your boundary and walk away. But it's kind of giving them grace of like, if there is ever room for them to, if they're dealing with something that I maybe never knew that they were dealing with, that I always leave that door of opportunity open if they have, you know what I'm saying? And it's not like an expectation of like, curing any like old relationships or anything like that. It's just of understanding that people go through that you'll never understand. You know what I mean? You'll never know, you'll never understand. And knowing that if they need to have a conversation with a person and they can't go to anybody, and you might have to be that person for that one conversation, I would be that. Regardless of like, I never speak to them again after that. I'm okay with that. It's just it's because like when people detach themselves, you know what I mean? And push people away and stuff like that, and they have no one to go to, or they feel like they have no one to go to. I always want to offer that to an individual, because I've been there, and it's so hard to get out of it. And it's something I think a lot of people are very scared to talk about, because I do feel like a lot of people, especially now with the way the world is, I know we're more connected, but really not, you know what I mean?
We're not. Yeah, it's more...
Yeah, exactly, on a virtual sense, but not in a physical sense. And I think a lot of people are really, really struggling with being seen, and understood, and... over the last 5 years too, I feel like there's been a pretty significant uptick of loss and everything else. I think the more we have conversations, just honest conversations with each other, you don't have to, like volunteer as tribute to talk about your trauma, but to reach out to someone in your, in your inner circle, or in your family or friend or call, to whoever, whatever it is, like, if you have to have that conversation, do it. Just ask. And you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised what happens. Like sometimes something good can come out of it, because not everybody, and I also respect, like, not everybody wants to go to therapy.
Right.
Or, you know what I mean? So it's just, I don't know, the more we can talk about it, and I don't know.
I think just for people to know, I think just for people to know that they're not alone, and we're all just broken people trying to figure this life out. And I think, I have found a positive connection on social media, in that I've been able to find other grief accounts and kind of just, just in like the positive things that are being posted, or the funny things that are being posted. When I need a good laugh, I'll go to like I think there's an account, and I'm probably getting it wrong, and I'll post the correct account. I don't know if it's still active, but there's like a Dead Dads Club or something. And they post and it's just like these really funny memes that are obviously relatable if you've experienced the loss of a dad. And it's just so funny because like when I really just needed a good laugh, I would go to that account and just cackle at like the silly things that were being posted. But I found comfort in that moment, because I was like, I don't want to be all sad right now. I want to laugh and I want to kind of snap out of it. And sometimes you need that. And sometimes you need to talk to someone. And social media can be so positive in that way that you can connect with other people who are experiencing the same thing. But just also, I've learned through the years that it's just also this very curated place. So you have to be very careful.
It's a slippery slope.
It's a very slippery slope. And I think that with social media, while you can make those connections, right? Like I found those other grief accounts that I like to follow, and I find, the stuff that they share comforting. And I oftentimes will reshare it on my stories because I feel like more people need to see it. And I found this comforting or meaningful or whatever. It's also a slippery slope where if you're feeling alone and you base your village around how many likes you get or how many followers you acquire, that can be, that's where the slippery slope happens, right? Because nobody's watching my stories or nobody's liking my things. So I definitely have a love-hate relationship with social media in that way. But there are very good resources if you look for them. If you look for the ones that are helpful, where you can find community. There's another grief account that is, I think it's called Untangled Grief. Again, if I'm getting the exact name wrong, I'll put all the links. They have an actual online community that people can go to. And I haven't subscribed to it myself, so I don't know if it's free or if it's paid, but they do share about it a lot. And it looks like a very positive community. Obviously, it's people who all have that same connection of grief. I find comfort in just following the Instagram account and kind of following along in that way. So I'll definitely share that in the show notes too. But yeah, I just feel like kind of the Cliff's Notes version of it is that grief is not linear in any way, shape, or form. It's not just an emotional, thing that we go through. It's also a physical one, a mental one, obviously emotionally. And it's something that is literally becomes part of our life. It's not a moment that we experienced and then like, oh, but like the funeral happened 3 years ago. So like you should be fine now. It's literally a part of my life every single day. Not a day goes by where I'm not thinking of my parents or something my dad said or wishing. Like I so wish, one of my biggest regrets is my dad had like the worst dad jokes because they were in Spanish. And and he would have these little sayings all the time. And what's so crazy is it was like the same ones, like cycled all the time. And I can hardly remember them now, but I know them. Like I hear some of them in my head, but I can't quite remember them. And I'm like, oh man, I wish I would have written them down when he was saying them just to kind of have, which is something I encourage people to do now. I'm like, take the pictures.
Oh, yeah. Take
the pictures. Take the pictures. Even if you look horrible, get in the picture. Take the picture.
The candid shots are always the best.
The candid shots, even the pose ones are great. The candid shots, the pose shots, take the pictures. Cause one of my biggest regrets and I'm working really hard on letting the regrets go because I think that's a big thing that can be all consuming sometimes. It's like my friend said, that is a very, very deep, deep, deep rabbit hole that you can get completely lost in if you allow yourself to start going down it. But like one of the things for me was I had always said this to my husband, and we just never made it happen, was two things: going on a family vacation with like my parents and my kids, and like trying to get my sisters to go with their family. And that just never happened. And then the family picture. Like I always envisioned, I wanted a picture with my parents and like all their grandkids.
Mm-hmm. It's okay. I know.
Oh, I was doing so good.
It's okay. I think probably the last thing I want to say is there's no perfect goodbye. So no. I think
well, now that we're crying.
I know.
Well, now that we're ruining the mascara.
I know. There's no perfect goodbye. I think it took me a really long time to come to terms with it. Yeah. But they leave, but you still see signs, whether you want to believe it or not. The signs will come, when you least expect it.
But I also don't want anyone to feel like if they don't see signs, that means they're not there.
Yeah, exactly. There's no like.
There's no right or wrong way. It's what's in your heart and it's what you feel. Because I really don't want someone who's grieving to feel worse if they feel like
like F you. I was looking for.
I didn't get a sign. Yeah, someone said, and I'm not going to say who it was, but someone had said something like, "Oh, I can't wait to like dream with my parent." They had passed and they were holding on to that. Yeah. Like, I want to have a dream with them, and I'm like, and I haven't had that dream with them yet, right? And, I just remember saying, it's okay. It's okay. It'll happen. And if it doesn't happen, it's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they loved you less, or it doesn't mean anything. It's just, maybe that's not what you need if you don't get that dream.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because
I think,
something that I struggled with is, I remember my mom, when she was alive, she would say that every year on her birthday, her brother, who had passed away before her, would visit her in her dream like clockwork every year on her birthday. She would always have a dream with her brother. And I thought that was so, I was like, wow, that's amazing, right? And so I was convinced, Mommy, surely, Mom, I know you're going to come visit me every year on my birthday. Well, joke's on me because she does not. Joke's on me because she does not. But I learned that, I kind of learned to be okay with that, because that doesn't mean anything. And, if she doesn't come to my dreams, that doesn't mean she loved me less. That doesn't mean she didn't love me at all. Doesn't mean she hates my guts. Like, that just means that that's not what I need in my healing process or in my grieving process. I don't need to have that. That consistent yearly visit. It would be nice. It would be nice, but I feel her in different ways, and I'm sure you feel your parents in different ways, and they're probably so not the same if we start going over the list of what they are. But if you're grieving, it's a journey, and it's forever, unfortunately, and fortunately too, right? Because they say grieving is all the love that you have for someone, and you're just, you can't give it to them anymore. I mean, you can, but they're not here to receive it. So the grief is just all your love being let out for them.
Yeah.
I found that.
And I feel like the love, the unexpressed love that you never got to continue with them, it comes out in other ways. Like for me, like, with our children, or, just friendships, like family, there's, I don't know. It's like you see pieces of them in others.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And you can't really forget that, a part of you may have died with them, but you are still that piece that keeps on going, that, that part of them that keeps on going. So it's definitely, I'm glad we had this conversation.
Me too. I know. It's so crazy.
We laughed.
It's so crazy. We laughed. Oh, I tried so hard not to cry. I really did. I prayed about it before the interview. Please, God, just don't let me cry. But that's okay, because that's life. That's grief, right? Like, it just, I think that's a perfect example of how sometimes we spend our entire day trying not to cry and to like save it till we like are alone. And sometimes we can't. I want to wrap this up. And first of all, I want to thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me.
Thank you for having this conversation. This is awesome.
Thank you for being here. I'm terrible at this, I don't know an eloquent ending to this episode. I'm like looking at my notes. Let's see. So, final takeaways from you and your guests. My final takeaway is grief is so messy in that I don't look at it as a bad messy. It's not mud, like I said. It's just this beautiful lace that intertwines itself in our everyday life. And it's something that you don't heal from it, because it's not a sickness. But it's something that, at least for me, I'm learning to carry. I'm learning to carry this weight and be okay with it. You just learn how to carry it, and you learn what works for you, and you allow it to, again, at least for me, I've allowed my grief to mold me and take me on this journey where I know for a fact that had I not experienced this grief, I wouldn't be here. But is there a one takeaway that you want to offer up to our audience?
I think the takeaway is, if you choose to feel through all of it, allow yourself to break down. There is beauty in the healing, and you start to realize you will love so much harder. You will fight so much harder. You will want to live so much more purposefully in how you do business, in how you do relationships, in how you purely exist. And in that, you start to create spaces that you didn't even realize for other people that will have a lasting impact. And it's something so precious and so, I think, crucial for a lot of us that no one really wants to admit. I truly believe, like, my biggest takeaway, it is not stages, it is cycles. There are cycles of grief that feel like roller coaster rides. That will affect you.
And I hate roller coaster rides.
Yes, they will affect you emotionally and physically and spiritually. And you start to learn how to make room for it. And in that, you just have to understand that it's okay to feel both, to want to move forward, but also feel like sometimes you want to give up. It's part of the healing process. But when you do have conversations with other people that are willing to give you that space to express yourself, you'd be surprised how worth it is. I don't know how else to explain it.
Amen. And just one last thing just popped into my mind. Give yourself grace.
Yes.
That's what I want to end this with. Just give yourself grace, and don't go through it alone. So you're not alone in this. Thank you, Alicia. I love you so much.
Thank you, Jess. Love you too.
Thank you guys for listening, and hopefully I'll catch you on the next episode. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me on a Catholic journey. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps others find the podcast and be part of this journey. Until next time, remember, where Jesus leads the way, we are called to follow.